Hello and welcome to episode 7 of Esports Boom. I'm Anton Ferraro, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Maurice Eisenman. I think that this was kind of a slower week in esports, but there were a couple of interesting developments, and I believe Mo has the first story he wants to talk about.
Yeah, and I think there's one story that really stands out as far as the bigness of it, and that is that Ninjas in Pyjamas got an investment. Just to go over the facts, so according to sources to the Esports Observer, they said that it's an investment by the son of Jan Stenbeck. So Jan Stenbeck, he is one of the richest people in Sweden. He actually was on the MTG board. He had a large stake in MTG, and for people who don't know, MTG owns ESL, MTG owns DreamHack, and it was his son basically. However, MTG no longer lists Stenbeck's son as a stakeholder, so that's obviously been taken off. And then this investment is seen as in the double-digit millions. So that is great, especially for Ninjas in Pyjamas, which is a European team, which obviously them getting into the EU LCS obviously is less valuable than getting into the LCS. But still, I mean, it's extremely exciting to see European esports teams that are really focused on the European market get this type of investment. So Ninjas in Pyjamas released a statement where they said that it was primarily used for global expansion. With this investor coming along, they thought it was a good opportunity to get him on board. Ninjas in Pyjamas is particularly known they have a PC line, they have an accessory line, they like to brand products using their brand, to sell products using their brand, and I think that this influx of capital will definitely help with that. What do you think, Anton?
So I think one of the most interesting numbers that was reported was that it was an 8-figure investment for only 15% of the company. That is very different from most of the numbers that I'm hearing right now in terms of team acquisitions. Most of the acquisitions right now, they're getting a majority or a much higher than 15% stake for that 8-digit investment round. Whoever negotiated that deal on behalf of Ninjas in Pyjamas, props. I mean, I think Ninjas in Pyjamas definitely sold off, a very small part of their company for a very large valuation. So I mean, I guess like at 15%, let's say it's 10 million. What is that? It's $80 million valuation for the company.
I think it's 70, 75 or something out of the top of my head. But that's obviously it's great. To be honest, if you would ask me if I would pay $10 million for 15% of Ninja in Pyjamas, I like the team. I wouldn't do it. I think it's an overvaluation. But I'm happy for them, and like you said, props to whoever brokered that deal. What is interesting is that you can maybe rationalize it if you see it as a long-term play where you consider them to be more than just an esports team, but you consider them to be a brand that they've already proven that they're able to sell, particularly in the Nordics and some parts of Europe. They're able to sell endemic gear, so like PCs and stuff like that, using their brand. So if you're able to expand that into other regions, if you're able to expand that with different types of merchandise, then it'll definitely, it has potential as a brand besides just an esports team. What do you think, Anton? Would you invest this type of money in Ninjas in Pyjamas?
I mean, probably not. It's a very high valuation for a team that, peaked maybe a year or two ago with their Counter-Strike squad. They've kind of struggled in the LCS. They've had a somewhat spotty track record since that giant success in Counter-Strike. I think what else is interesting is that you have somebody who was basically in MTG, left MTG, saw what MTG was going after, and then he's now paralleling their investments with, investments into a team. It does feel like a little bit of a FOMO situation, and there might be something personal going on, which is why, he was willing to enter that investment for any price.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much it with this story. it is good that we're getting to the point where more and more European teams will get this type of investment. When you see the LCS expanding into so many different countries with so many different teams, obviously I think you will see a lot of traditional sports teams just starting their own team, but already existing teams obviously have a brand, obviously have a reach, which is extremely valuable. So I think in the near future you'll see more European teams get this type of investment, League of Legends teams in particular, especially as the LCS franchise spots, the NA-LCS franchise spot get finalized.
Yeah, no, I definitely think Riot kind of also helped them out with stabilizing Europe a little bit more and, creating a franchising system over there. I also remember a couple months ago there was a whole situation where Ninjas in Pyjamas wasn't paying their players, or there were issues with receiving payments. So it's nice that they were able to basically pull out of that nosedive and get the money that will allow them to become successful. So I think I don't really have any more thoughts on that story. I think they paid too much. I think you and I are pretty much in alignment on this. I think the other interesting story this year was the report that Nielsen released. Nielsen put out their first esports analysis about a month ago. They announced they're going to be moving into esports in a formal way. It was a very good report. I agree with the majority of the things in it. There were two things that kind of stood out to me, if I'm going to call them out. Like, I hate to focus on the negative. This report was probably 90% better than 90% of the things I've seen written about esports. The two things that I didn't agree with was that on their most popular teams, TSM was not listed. That felt very weird. The moment that you start going into organizations like Fnatic and TSM's not on the list, it's bizarre. The second one that wasn't, my second issue was that they referenced Halo's a cross-platform game, which makes me think that they're categorizing cross-platform games or console games as cross-platform games. That felt like, a little bit of a poor use of nomenclature. I don't know, Mo, what stood out to you from the report?
Well, there are two types of factoids that the report has, which were really interesting to me. So, they asked what the most popular PC titles were, and a lot of people have done this, but Counter-Strike in the US is number 1, followed by League, Dota 2, StarCraft, and Heroes of the Storm, and that's for PC. When you're looking at console, it becomes 61% of esports fans play Call of Duty, which isn't surprising because it's, in my opinion, I think it's by far the most popular console esports title out there as far as reach and play. And in the United Kingdom, surprisingly, it's Grand Theft Auto, which is the most popular title among esports fans with a play percentage of 63%, which is also not surprising because Grand Theft Auto is by far the most popular game.
Yeah, it's funny. I think that I saw a statistic on Steam Spy the other day that, Grand Theft Auto 5, which was a 2013 title, was like the second highest selling title of 2017 or something ridiculous like that. So, Rockstar has kind of provided a lot of longevity to the game. The other one that kind of sticks out, while we're nitpicking things, is that H1Z1 is kind of popping up on the top 5 PC exclusive games followed through esports, and H1Z1 really kind of has fallen off the map and been replaced by PUBG. So my thought is that some of the data that they gathered that they presented in this report might be weeks or months old, because PUBG has basically replaced H1Z1 on every list of metrics. What else?
Yeah, the big question is, can we trust, or how valuable is this report in general? Like, what do you think in particular is the value that Nielsen can bring to the table?
I think, when there's competition, the consumer always wins. I think that, there has been kind of an outcry recently from many people endemic to esports that the numbers presented by Newzoo or their other competitors are, slightly optimistic, and that it's creating a bubble that's larger than it should be for esports. I think a lot of people were able to leverage the Newzoo numbers to raise massive rounds. Whether or not, that is going to be beneficial long term to the industry remains to be seen. But I do think that, Nielsen kind of came out with things that sound realistic, and I didn't really have that much of an issue with anything that they put out.
Yeah, and it's also interesting to know that for Nielsen, this type of playbook that they released, it's kind of a teaser for our bigger services. I think they're planning on making money back. They now offer consulting services. They have for esports as well. They will probably get more of an active role with particular partners and providing services for them. That's obviously at the end their money maker. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, yes, they're really good at these type of reports, and it's surprisingly sober, which is very good. Which probably happened because they have a very good board of directors involved with their esports department, ranging from MLG to Twitter to Blizzard.
I saw Craig Levine was in the report. That's ESL.
Yeah, so definitely props to Nielsen. A lot of people were afraid that they would come out and kind of just reiterate these type of cliches, but it's a great first step, and I cannot wait to see what they will do in the future.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to go to my next story. It's a little bit of a smaller one, but I thought it was interesting, and it's kind of something that I've been tracking, and it connects with other things. So Ben Fisher from the Sports Business Journal reported that CAA acquired. I'm blanking on their name right now. They acquired the Barrett Sports Group. So the Barrett Sports Group was the organization that negotiated the sale of broadcast rights, the LCS broadcast rights to BAMTech. And it was honestly one of the largest deals for esports broadcast deals ever done. I'm really tempted to say it was the largest, and I'm pretty confident in saying it was the largest. The number I think that was reported was somewhere between 250 and 350 million spread out over a couple years. An agency like that, I'm going to guess maybe takes 10% of that number. So, it's a pretty hefty chunk of change for them. And it's interesting that they were acquired by CAA, whose direct competitor is WME IMG. So it's one of the big sports agencies, talent agencies that's now coming into the space at full steam. I think about a year ago, I was at E3. I was at one of their video game parties. They had Alexis Ohanian there. They were really actively exploring the space, trying to figure out, okay, this thing is growing. How do we do it? I think they're involved in YouTube a little bit now. So now it seems like, they're getting some expertise in the esports space. And it's kind of a little bit of ironic because, it's widely been reported that BAMTech is kind of slow on delivering their product. So CAA made some money, and then now WME IMG kind of swooped in, benefited from BAMTech's, slow to market strategy, and was able to squeeze in T-Mobile into the LCS World Championships. So it's kind of funny how these guys are chipping away at each other from various angles.
Yeah, and I think CAA had to do something, and they had to do something very quick, because when you look at the stuff WME IMG has done, they have this incredible track record, and when it comes to CAA, it is zilch. It is almost nothing. So yes, they had to forcibly acquire this company to kind of get those accolades, and it's a brain buy. So they get all these people into their company who probably have experience and have those connections, because WME IMG is miles ahead of them. The number of endemic brands and non-endemic brands in particular they have brought into the space is astonishing. I don't think it's an overstatement to say that that they are the agency or the player that has brought in the most non-endemic sponsors in the past year for esports. When you look at any other competitor, they've done tremendous stuff. So yeah, CAA has a lot to catch up on, but competition is good. We can't have just WME IMG as the go-to agency. If CAA becomes more competitive, that is great. And it's also what is good to note that a lot of these agencies have exclusive brands that they work with. So it could be in sometimes that you can be a Coca-Cola, or Coca-Cola probably not, but you're a smaller brand and you work with WME IMG, or you work with another agency, and that's the GMR or something like that. That's where you feel comfortable with, and that's where you spend most of your ad dollars with. So if we get more players in this space, then we also get more brands involved into esports, and that is great for all of us.
No, absolutely. And then just, like a little footnote as well, in terms of new brands entering the space. Cup of Noodles is now the official sponsor of Rocket League Championship Series. I thought that was fun. Props to Nate and his sales team for locking that one down. It's Cup of Noodles. It's actually, they've kind of been hovering over this video game space for a while. I don't know if you played Final Fantasy 15, but there was so many references to cup noodles in the game. It's like one of the main characters, he's like, my favorite thing in the world to eat is cup of noodles. And now it's like, they're in Rocket League. So, props to them. So I think, what is our follow-up story?
Well, I think a story, there's not a good bridge between this story, but I think it's very good, is that we have the first ever U.S. state to have a statewide esports high school project, and it's done by EGF. Our mutual friend Tyler has been working on this for months, and this is really good. So basically, what it is that the Connecticut Association of Schools officially joins the EGF High School League Season 1. And last year EGF had a partnership with a Connecticut-based high school organization for their pilot season. And now they're going all in, which is great, because high school esports has been notoriously, I think, underestimated as a force, because all these schools, they're looking for STEM involvement, and esports has shown that it can help bring in STEM, and it brings in the type of students that you want. But it is a shame, and it's I don't understand how you can have, every school has their own high school volleyball team, which is played by a handful of people, and there aren't a lot of schools that have an esports league. An inter-school esports league, and this is a great step forward, and I'm very confident that Tyler and the team at EGF will use this momentum and deliver a great product, but this will also help with other states, and this will make it a lot easier for people working in collegiate and in high school esports in other states to open up some eyes. So what do you think, Anton?
No, I mean, there's been a lot of conversation about NCAA, collegiate esports. I mean, high school is definitely the next step. It's great that people are recognizing it on a state level basis. I'm sure high schools are even more terrified of the repercussions of football than colleges are. Esports is growing. It's a buzzword. I have two sisters, one who just finished high school, one who is in high school, and the big discussion is, how do we incorporate technology into the classroom, into the extracurricular activities. Esports lives there, so it makes a ton of sense. I think another story that we're kind of jumping around today. It was a little bit of a slow week. We just came out 2 minutes ago. PUBG will be at IEM Oakland. PUBG, massive title that's gaining tons of momentum. They had it at the last ESL event. I think that was somewhere in London. It was actually a lot of fun to watch. It seemed like it was a success. I really liked the set. I'm really curious to see how ESL will improve their offering this time. They did an excellent job last time. It's a great game. I think, the spectatability of it is huge. I mean, everybody's talking about how Overwatch is so difficult to follow, and now Overwatch, they hired Alchemist, and he's actually working with the dev team to try and make that title more easier to consume. But PUBG, it's like right straight out of the box. You get it. Everybody's seen the Hunger Games. It's everybody enjoyed Battle Royale. You have your favorite streamers that are in there. You have your guys that are coming from Counter-Strike. You have your guys that are coming from Halo. It's just this perfect mixing pot of every FPS esports player in a game that's easy to follow and is wildly entertaining.
So what do you think is necessary for PUBG to, because you have a production experience, so what do you think is necessary for the title to grow and to become more consumable and better as an esports title, to really get an ecosystem around it?
I think you need your heroes. I think that right now it's a lot of people on Twitch, and it's great. I don't necessarily I don't think that that is hurting their early growth. I think that is the perfect 0 to 1 strategy to have all those streamers. I think the 1 to 10 strategy is to basically identify those guys that are going to be your heroes. Like, Dr. Disrespect, he's great at the game. He's interesting. Do I think he's, in the top 0.001% of the players? Probably not. I do want to see those guys all get put together, see the strategies, and see how they face off against each other.
Yeah, but the big problem is, and this is something that Richard Lewis mentioned in his video on this topic, and I think it's a great listen if you want to know more about the behind the scenes at PUBG and what is necessary for the scene to grow, is that it is, as a production perspective, and he as a journalist and as a TV presenter, he said, it is very difficult for me to talk about the top players if you have, 80 or 100 people in each round.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, it's different. I don't think it's hard. It's if you look at guys like Thor and if you look at guys like Richard Lewis, they are tracking 100 players in Counter-Strike, 100 players in League of Legends. Okay, this time you're just putting them all in one game. There's a lot going on. I think that, from a production standpoint, okay, like with MLG, 7-10 years ago, we decided that Call of Duty was, a game that was designed for a 5-on-5. We were going to make it into a 4-on-4 title because, our Halo set had 4 people and, the cost of setting up productions were, higher for 5 people. So, okay, we turned it into a 4-on-4 title. I think now that with esports you have, the money to execute a lot of these projects, putting 100 people on the stage, it's not a problem. With PUBG, okay, you have a map, you can follow the players, you can kind of predict where the action's going to be. I think that it's different. I think it might be a little harder. It's not magnitudes harder. I think it's, a couple, a steep incline harder. But it's just, like you're gonna get people who are really good at what they're doing. You're gonna get people who, from the caster booth, they're the ones who are switching the games. I'm not sure if right now if Counter-Strike, the observer dictates who you're watching, but I think that the moment that it becomes, that you get a caster, like sort of like what happens in Halo, where he decides who they want to follow, and it's a person who can do both things at once, that it'll become a easier and a better experience for everybody.
Yeah, that's very true. And just to since we're talking, about what is necessary for esports to grow, and one of the stories that was particularly interesting, not necessarily because of the what the story says, primarily what it didn't say, was the fact that 2 of the LCS challenger teams, Goldcoin United and E United, were unable to make it into the LCS. So Jacob Wolf once again reported this on ESPN. He said that Goldcoin United did not make the second phase, which is an in-person interview with the Riot staff, which is an interesting tidbit for people to know. So there is no in-person interview on the first phase, so the second phase dictate that. And then more importantly was that E United actually, their investment fell off. So originally they had a plan to work with Salt Lake City-based capital firm called Sorensen Capital, and they would have a strategic partnership with the Utah Jazz, which is interesting to note because the Utah Jazz is one of the teams in the NBA 2K League, is one of the teams who, from a couple months ago, already hired an esports manager, so they've probably been brewing with this for a while.
And they had Gordon Hayward on their team for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And he was a big evangelist for esports. So I mean, they need the space.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing with a lot of these teams is when they're in negotiations with the with these larger traditional sports things, everybody's trying to get the Ninjas in Pyjamas deal, where they sell a minority stake, they get their money, they can execute their growth phase. And, they can still benefit, after executing the growth phase by owning equity in the company. And, sometimes you get the Ninjas in Pyjamas deal, and then sometimes you don't make it into the LCS. Yeah. And I mean, Gold Coin, especially them, it's like, if they had no outside financial backing, and I don't even know if did they even run a team before this, or were they just trying to put together a team?
Well, they had the challenger team. I think that was their first step into it. I mean, that's the thing. it is impossible to at this point to scale into franchise league without heavy financial investment. And if you're an investor, what are you going to prefer to invest in? Are you going to prefer, if you're buying a team, right? If you're buying stake in a team, are you going to invest, maybe pay a premium, but are you going to invest in an NRG where the chances of you getting, or a Cloud9 where the chances of you getting into an LCS or getting into Overwatch League are way higher? Or are you going to take a risk and invest a lot of money in a team that's probably not going to make it? You can have a contingency plan like what happened with United, that the investment will only go through if you get accepted, but it's a waste of your time to do that because most likely they won't get in, especially in the LCS.
Yeah, I mean, what is it, 102 teams, they're accepting 10, 12, something like that. I mean, those odds are stacked against.
Yeah, and if you're an actual NALCS team, you obviously have a lot more chance of getting in than if you're a challenger team. Because you already have that brand, and the LCS is not going to say no to that unless they have a really good reason not to. So when one of the interesting things that is not directly esports but is from a sponsorship perspective is really awesome was that Diesel actually released a shoe line together with Street Fighter. So it's a capsule collection. And it's funny because like 3-4 weeks ago, I tweeted out something like, I don't understand why the FGC like the fighting game community does not have a shoe sponsor. Like it's so endemic to the scene. Like so many of the top players are sneakerheads, and if you release a capsule collection with them, it's so logical. Like people are gonna buy it, and like it's gonna sell out in days, and this is definitely a first step towards that. I mean, props to Diesel, because the Street Fighter community, I couldn't go on any FGC website or forum without seeing this plastered everywhere. And I can't imagine, like, they're $200 a shoe, which is for Diesel prices is very expensive. And I can't imagine them still being in stock 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's been a couple of collaborations with video game clothing. Uniqlo has a great line with Nintendo, I believe. And Street Fighter is a pretty iconic brand. Yeah, I think the other one that was in the space that was very similar to this was Ult. They are now collaborating with Versus. Some of their jerseys came out. They're saying that their jerseys are way different. They don't look more like the traditional jerseys. It's a whole unique style. Props to Manny and Nate on putting that together. Saw some of those when I was out in Vegas 2 weeks ago. I think that there's a lot of potential in merchandising and with esports and video gaming, and it's as these teams look to pad their bottom line, you're going to see more and more of that go in. What is it? We had Jack and Jones with North or something? Astralis. There was another one I think that was like a week ago or something. But yeah.
And this what you mentioned about Ultimate, their philosophy, one of the things that I think is very smart and more brands should do, and the Street Fighter fits in perfectly with that, is don't just take a soccer jersey or a cycling jersey, what a lot of teams use, and just put like an awesome design on it. Like it's really awesome, and I wear my esports jerseys all the time. But realistically, like why shouldn't you have a streetwear-esque jersey? As long as it's playable, as long as it looks a lot cooler, why shouldn't you? You're not sweating bullets during an esports game, and these can be jerseys that are as cool to wear outside of the game as during the game, and that can expand their reach way beyond the actual game, and like fans who don't even care about people who don't even care about Cloud9 can wear like an awesome Cloud9 jersey because it's just really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I'm remembering right now the status quo tracksuits from like 2010, esports leisure wear as they called it. And I think that there's a lot of potential for it. Mo, I think that about covers it for most of my stories. Was there anything else you wanted to touch on?
We sometimes end up by talking about something that we've read that we think is really good. And I know you're not going to mention it yourself, so I'll mention it. But I think it's worthwhile for everyone. Anton just released an incredible thing on his website that basically tracks basically almost all relevant esports stories from the genesis almost. So all the way to right now, and he updates it every month, and it's worthwhile. Like, it's a blast from the past, and know your history. Anton, you can give them the link right now.
No, yeah, I mean, it's antonferrara.com/esportshunt. I've had a pretty great response to it so far. I had people from way back in the day sending me links that I kind of was able to squeeze in there. I updated a lot. Some of the earliest articles go back to like 1997, which, it was way fun digging through Wayback Machine and CPL forums and ES, like every other website that you probably forgot that you knew. And it's fun. It's a spreadsheet. Everybody loves spreadsheets.
Yeah. Well, that's going to be it for all of us. Before we give our Twitter usernames, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. You can find us on iTunes. You can find us on Stitcher. You can find us on Blog Talk Radio, and we're working on getting us on Google Play as well. Anton, where can people find you?
You guys can find me on Twitter at Joker Can't Spell, no E, get the joke.
And you can find me at MREISENMANN. And thank you very much, and we're looking forward to next week.